I'm Cassie Ulph. So my project's called Developing an Attribute-Based Sentiment Analysis Model for Romantic Period Letters. So essentially what we are doing is we are looking at a large corpus of 18th century letters by a single writer in this case. So this is just a pilot. And we are using a technique from natural language processing concept called sentiment analysis. And we're doing a kind of concept-based, or what might be called topic-based. So where you look for sentiment polarity, so broadly positive or negative, in relation to particular concepts. So in my case, the concept I'm interested in the letters we're using, which are the letters of Hester Thrale Piozzi, who's an 18th century author and kind of diarist and traveller and salonier. I'm interested in ideas of place and home and kind of national identity alongside specific geographical locations where she lived and wrote. Paul and Omnia, so Paul Bousselard and Omnia Zayed, who are computational linguists at the Data Insight Centre at Galway, what they normally do is work with much more contemporary data, kind of global media, and they've been tracking things like attitudes to kind of COVID messaging and very contemporary issues. So one of the things we want to get out of this is just seeing if this can work for historical English corpora. And how it might work. So there has been some work around periodicals from a roughly similar period with natural language processing and sentiment, but there isn't a lot really. So this is kind of developing methodology on the computational linguistics side, as well as offering a potential new approach to the literary study side that I'm interested in. So I initially thought what I'd get to do with this is I could investigate my contention about how Piozzi feels about particular places, and I could kind of quantify that and say, well, does my thesis that she has an ambivalent and kind of changing relationship with particular places, like, for example, Stratton Park, which was her home with her first husband and where she was a kind of literary hostess, but was a sort of frustrated author at that period. That becomes a place that has changing meanings for her, but is very important in her writing. So I wanted to look at that, and that's what I was hoping to get out of this. I'm now in week 3 of the fellowship, and I've had some initial conversations with colleagues in the computational linguistics side. And what's becoming apparent is that what Paul and Omnia do, which is called topic modelling, is that they actually kind of can do an unsupervised machine learning approach to the processing of the language and see what topics emerge. So yes, I'm very interested in place, and I'm very interested in how her sentiment in the kind of linguistic terms, so the broadly positive or negative attitude, shifts across this sort of 40-year period of letters that I've got, which is from 1784 to 1821. But also other things might pop out just from the data as patterns that we're not expecting. So that's quite exciting. And for that reason, we're just sort of seeing what it gives us, I think, at this stage. But my hope is that I'll get some usable data on how Piozzi feels about concepts of place and home, and specifically how she feels about key geographical locations, and especially that Stratton Park site, which for her was a kind of place that she kind of left and returned to quite a lot. It's also a place where in kind of modern day Streatham, I actually have a partnership with a number of community organisations and local history groups, trying to make connections between Piozzi as a historical figure who maybe could be more prominent in the area, and a kind of project of community and civic engagement with the history of the area. So how Piozzi feels about place and how people feel about Streatham now could be a really interesting overlap. So that's a possible future direction. So I'd come to digital humanities quite late, but I'd been working on a project that had a lot of textual editing and markup, and I was getting quite interested in text as data and starting to think that's where my next move might be. So I'd been reading very carefully any kind of opportunities that came up in that area to see if there were things I could be qualified for, if, you know, as a relative newcomer to the field, were the things that I could get involved in. So that's how I ended up kind of taking interest in thinking, I wonder what this fellowship is. Then I saw there was an opportunity to go abroad, so obviously I jumped. You know, because mobility is a really important part. It's making international connections, but also it's seeing another part of the world, and that's one of the things that is wonderful about academia, is it is an opportunity to go and work in other places and really experience them. So that was another appealing factor. So I started to think about what I might want to do, and I was really thinking about probably quite a not terribly complicated transcription editing project that would give me some data to do this kind of work with. And I was thinking about looking at place, and I was thinking about kind of manually tagging, but then running some kind of statistical analysis basically on the text that I'd marked up. But the first thing I did was I emailed the person who was tweeting about it, is Justin, who was the Galway contact for the scheme. So I thought I'd talk to him and just say to him, I've got an idea, I don't know if it's the kind of thing that the institute should be interested in. So that was a really useful conversation, because firstly, it kind of established, yes, it absolutely was the kind of thing that was of interest to the scheme. So any sense that you have when seeing these projects that, oh, that's probably not for me, I would really encourage people to just get in touch and say, this is my idea, is it of interest? And the worst that can happen is somebody says no, but actually what's more likely is I'll say, yeah, it could be, and have you thought about this? And that's absolutely the way that conversation went. You don't have the skills, why not apply to learn them? You know, this is an opportunity for you to be in infrastructure where there are people doing things that you want to maybe be involved in.